My guest tonight was catapulted into the spotlight last year after leaking thousands of Facebook documents after leaving her job with the tech giant where she ran a monitoring team. In them were damning revelations about a company that appeared to know it was putting profits before the welfare of its own users. Frances Haugen has since become an international campaigner for internet safety, and as such she has been closely following the passage of the UK government's landmark online safety bill through Parliament. Frances Haugen joins me in the studio now. Frances, hi, very good to see you. It's been, what, a year since you left Facebook, maybe 8 months or so since your revelations first begun. What do you think has changed with big tech in that time?
Around the world, leaders who are working on tech reform, be it in the European Union with the Digital Services Act, be it in the United States, people like Amy Klobuchar, who's the first senator to get a bill involving tech reform out of committee in the Senate in 25 years, they're saying the same thing over and over again, which is when the information in the documents I brought forward came out, when we learned that Facebook had been consistently telling lies to cover for the fact that it was prioritizing profits over people, the era of just trust us ended. That's why these laws are moving forward for the first time after years and years of pushing.
Well, one of those laws is, of course, the UK's online safety bill. I'm particularly keen to talk to you about that. You're watching it very closely, monitoring it. It's a huge bit of legislation that continues to change as it goes through the House of Commons. You've had big criticisms of it previously for not going far enough. Now you've seen some of the changes. What's your view on what it proposes now?
I think there's some places where it's a really strong bill. Even compared to the Digital Services Act, it's probably even better for kids than the Digital Services Act, which is the most impressive piece of online safety legislation to ever pass. At the same time, there's other places that we need to make sure that we push further. So, for example, the bill doesn't commit to transparency. Facebook is different than most other companies that are similarly powerful because unlike, say, an oil company where we can go and test the air, test the water, test the soil around an oil derrick and know if they're telling the truth, with Facebook, it's an opaque thing. We only see our own screens. The current online safety bill doesn't guarantee transparency. It says Ofcom's going to investigate it for 2 years, and it might come to a conclusion at the end it doesn't want to. The Digital Services Act gives us transparency from day one. That's what the online safety bill needs.
And I think you've signed a letter with 40 or so charities this week about just that, about how the tech companies still aren't providing and won't provide under this bill enough data for the government to hold them account.
We're not putting in the letter of the law there's going to be data access.
What data access do you want them to hand over?
We want to have the ability to have secure access for certified researchers, for governmental officials, to be able to ask independent questions. For example, how do the moderation systems work? Who's being taken down? Who's being promoted with these algorithms? Who's being left out? They're wielding huge amounts of power in our society, and we have the right to know what's going on.
OK, something else I want to ask you about that is the business of anonymity. Now, big campaign underway to get the government to ban people existing entirely anonymously online. You don't have to tweet or appear under your own name, but you certainly do have to tell the tech companies who you really are. And they thought that would push down anonymous trolling. Now, the government isn't doing that. What's your take on that?
I think this question of anonymity online is a really complicated one. Remember, not all countries in the world have computer databases of IDs. As long as these tech companies want to operate in any of those countries, anyone who wants an anonymous account is just going to be able to use a VPN and get an account with whatever name. So I'm not sure if it's really going to work to demand having real identities online. But I think that's part of the reason why it's hard to get these things into law.
Now, look, we've just been talking about the far-right gunman who shot dead 10 people in Buffalo. He used Twitch to stream his rampage over the weekend. He got taken down after 2 minutes, but that was well enough time for people to copy it and spread it around the world. Ditto arguably the same thing's going on with Ukraine. We've seen YouTube keep up videos of British soldiers fighting in Ukraine. The Russians posted there completely against, well, all the Geneva Convention rules and also the family's wishes. How would you tackle these problems where you have a global issue, global tech forums doing things that no one government is able to control?
That's part of the reason why we need to start having the democratic process move into the content moderation debate. Right now, all of these decisions are being made in isolation by an unelected private company. In the case of something like Facebook, there's only one person who's accountable. Mark Zuckerberg controls all the votes, and so not even the shareholders are accountable in that case. When we're facing matters of international importance, international crisis, because some of the information that came out via social media on the war in Ukraine had security implications. We need to proactively start having those conversations. Facebook started that conversation with their oversight board and pulled back the ask for clarity They didn't want anyone else weighing in. We need a democratic process where Ofcom can say, hey, we need to think proactively about these things. Let's not just do it on the fly.
Fine, I just want to get your views on Elon Musk buying Twitter. He says Twitter is already, I bet it is, he says Twitter is already too moderated. It should be this bastion for free speech absolutism. Your views on that and your views on whether he's the right man to be owning it?
Well, I don't think we should ever think a billionaire riding to rescue us is the solution. Like, these are critical institutions in our democracies, and they should be part of the democratic process. But there are some things that he's saying that make me cautiously optimistic. The things that I've been endorsing are that content moderation doesn't work that well. We need to be focusing on product safety changes. That's things like, should you have to click on a link before you reshare it? It reduces misinformation by 10 or 15%, but it comes at the cost of little slices of profit, maybe 0.1%. Taking Twitter private opens up the ability to do many of those product safety changes because they won't have to publicly report the amount of profit every quarter. One of the first things Elon Musk said he wanted to do was make the algorithms transparent. But the second thing he said at the TED conference was, we're going to take down the bots, the robots. These are little computer programs that pretend to be people. They're the #1 danger on social media because they allow our enemies like Russia to blast out whatever message is going to be most useful for them. The reason why Twitter doesn't take them down today, the thing that may end up ruining the deal, because Elon said, wait, you've been saying 5% of your users are bots for years. That can't be right. It can't stay the same every quarter. The reason Twitter doesn't take the bots off their platform is because the number of users they have goes down then. And for tech companies, if you lose even 1% of users, your stock price might crash 10%. So going private would give him the freedom to do that. And he's clearly listening to someone who's wise, because those are two of my favorite interventions.
I suspect he might be listening to you.
He might be. I know other people he's talking to who I have a lot of respect for.
Francois, it's a great pleasure to talk to you again. Thanks so much for coming.